Alright, hello everyone. My name is Nana. I am a practicing midwife and a lactation consultant. I tell you what, I think this is an amazing event, and I'm so glad. I mean, I think she deserves a round of applause. I think we need to do more of this, and just sitting by the tables and just talking to everyone and listening to what everybody's saying is so insightful. It's almost as though we all are talking from the same hymn sheet. So it's exciting. I hope this is one of many events like this.
Yeah.
So that's me, basically.
Thank you. And would you like to introduce yourself?
Me?
Yes. The same way as you introduce yourself to.
Hi, I'm Sian. I'm a doula and hypnobirthing practitioner. I go under visionary births, and this is my daughter Amira.
And do we have anyone at the back that just come in? Would you like to introduce yourself? So we.
My name is Orte, and I'm a doula, and what else do you need to know?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Zoe. I'm a breastfeeding peer supporter in Harringay.
Thank you. And
I'm Amanda, mother of 3, and interested in becoming a doula.
oh, nice. Thank you all for coming. So we're gonna hit back to the Facebook Live. Okay, hi. We're back from lunch, and we've got Nana here, who'll be speaking to you about breastfeeding and changing the trends within the Black community. So Nana, would you like to introduce yourself to Facebook and everybody else here again? And
Okay, so hello, I'm Nana. I'm a midwife and a lactation consultant, and today I'm going to be talking about changing the trends of breastfeeding within the Black community. I'm gonna. I've already explained and introduced myself, and you know what I do. When I first got the call from Ruth to do this talk, I was scratching my head thinking, what am I going to talk about and what I'm going to say. And then I thought to myself, perhaps I'll start by using my own background. So I'm originally from Ghana. I grew up in Ghana until I was about 12 or 15, and then I came to live here. I've always been interested in working with newborns and new moms. It's just something that really fascinated me. And the reason for this is that growing up, my mom used to be a dressmaker. She used to work from home, and when people had their children and they were about to go to work, guess who they would leave their children with? My mom. And she would make sure that everybody had breastfed their baby before they went to work. And then I remember her gathering all these women in the front porch and making them express breast milk for their babies. And that's what I saw. So when I came to live here, I always knew I wanted to do something with babies. So when I came to live here, I went to uni, started my training, and then I was introduced to the NHS, your typical NHS ward. And I remember, like yesterday, this woman coming to her desk. This is a newly qualified, new student midwife. First day on the postnatal ward, and I remember this woman coming onto the ward, onto the desk in tears and saying, "No one's helped me to breastfeed." And I remember thinking, "What? What do you mean no one's helped you to breastfeed? Why do you need someone to help you to breastfeed?" So for me, that was my first real real awareness that breastfeeding was a problem, was a difficulty in this community. And then I kept hearing this constantly. So I thought to myself, what is this about? Anyway, fast forward 10 years later, I learned a lot of what I learned about breastfeeding is what I knew from I know. A lot of what I learned from breastfeeding is what I knew from observing women breastfeeding back home. And then I became a qualified midwife. Now, during my training, there was no such thing as there was some breastfeeding training, but I felt that I didn't have, there was no structured breastfeeding training. I had the basics, and then everything else that I learned on the ward. 10 years down the line, I realized I became a community midwife in that time, and then I realized in my community work that women would come home with lots of different experiences of breastfeeding. Some of them will come with a set idea of what they want to do, and some would come and say, this is what my midwife said to do. And there was a lot of conflict, and in fact I got confused myself because I was thinking, who is right? You know? So that's why I did my training to become a lactation consultant. So that's where I just thought I'll give you a background as to why I became a lactation consultant. Now, when Ruth approached me, I thought I had to think a few days about what is it I was going to talk about. And then I thought maybe I'll talk about how we can change, all of us, not just doulas and lactation consultants and midwives, but everybody in the community. What can we do to change the trends? Now, so I talked to you a little bit about my background. I mean, a lot of people in this country would not have seen a lot of the women that I look after. The first newborn they've seen is their own, right? Yeah, yeah. And often it's initially they think, oh, you know, this is fine. We've read all the books, and you know, we can do this. And then the baby arrives, and you realize that actually it's not that simple. And so I found that, again, visibility was what I now I see as a problem, because we don't see women breastfeeding. It's not a natural thing for most people, because we feel they need to learn about breastfeeding. You do need to learn about breastfeeding, sure, but I also feel that if it's something that is out there that you're seeing all the time, it removes the technicality of breastfeeding. Because you've seen it, because we learn by watching, isn't it? As adults, we learn by observing. So then I thought, as a community, what can we do to make breastfeeding visible amongst ourselves? What can we do? I thought I wasn't going to do this. I decided I'm not going to do this talk all by myself, so I'm going to ask you guys. So let's have a chat about this, because it's about us. It's not about, I think the responsibility lies with all of us. It's not just with the health service or with individual women. I think as Black women within our community, we need to take some responsibility. So let's have a chat. What can we do?
I think having spaces that when we visit, like children's centres, that we encourage the mothers who are breastfeeding to come along.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a separate breastfeeding group.
No.
But to say it's a breastfeeding friendly play group. Yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing that I thought about is, if you have a facility, or if it's in your power to be able to perhaps designate, and I think why have we got designated breastfeeding areas? Why are we not doing breastfeeding wherever we can breastfeed? What is it about designated breastfeeding areas? Because then you create the impression that it needs to be something that needs to be private. But why should it be private? Do you know what I mean? So if it's in your power, I thought, to have a sign, say, for example, breastfeeding is welcome here, for example. You know. And the other thing is, may I ask, how many of you attend religious, so Christians will attend religious services and things like that? Why don't we do it in church? Why do the women have to go outside and breastfeed their children? You know, so even within our churches, and I think correct me if I'm wrong, I think ethnic minorities, we attend church more than most people. So, and other religious meetings, so the mosque and things like that, within the mosque, you have an area where just women, so why don't you take your children? Why aren't you taking the children there to breastfeed? So it's things like that, so we can make a difference. And the other thing I was thinking about is, around where I live, sometimes I walk down the street and I see women sitting outside, well, occasionally breastfeeding, and I always make it a point to say something to the women. So I would either smile at them. I mean, some people will feel a bit strange if you go and stand over them and say something. So I would, give them respectable, a decent distance, and then I'll say it's beautiful, or well done, thumbs up, something just to make the whole experience positive, Now, any teachers here? Are you allowed to talk about breastfeeding in school?
I don't know, but I have referred to myself breastfeeding before, because it's such a big part of my life. So.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, I know there's lots of things about what you can tell other people's children. So why don't we start with our own children? Talk about breastfeeding at home with your children. So the other thing that I see, because I'm also a community midwife now, I'm a practicing community midwife, and I go into people's homes now, because the kids are home from school. You go to the homes and the kids are there. So I make it a point, you know, and say to the, you know, the older children, you know, what do you think about mum feeding? You know, I said, oh, and you know, tell me about what you know about how mum feeds the baby or something. They'll say all kinds of interesting things, you know, and they say, oh, it's milk from mummy's tummy, and I'm like, fantastic, you know, it's things like that. And you say to them, so are you going to tell your friends, you know, what are you going to tell their friends when you go to school? So I've got a lovely baby sister, and then, you know, I just make it a point to direct them a little bit towards how is this baby feeding. So I think these are some of the things that we can, the little things that we can do to give these children something to talk about, you know, amongst their friends, because it's something that needs to change. I think it's something that needs to change generationally, you know. We need to do it gradually, but we can do it. You know, just the simple things.
I think it's important also the partner, because I've seen like extremes of the partner either wanting to cover up the women or like a partner that's like, I'm so proud of my wife or my girlfriend. To the other extreme, I've got a friend and her boyfriend's like, oh, I love that she's bottle feeding because I can be involved. And I was like, okay.
Yeah. Well, do you know, I'm all for breastfeeding, but you also have to acknowledge that there are some women who aren't able to breastfeed all the time, and I'm thinking breast milk feeding is, well, it's good. It's just as good. And I'm thinking, yeah, why not? Why not engage? Why not include the dads? Now, I tell you what I do as a community midwife. If I go into a home and the mums were struggling, well, guess who I employ to help me? The fathers. So I get them, and what I find is they're very technical. They need to understand what's going on. So I break it down for them. I say, this is what you do, and on day 3, this is what's going to happen, and this is what you do. And I leave them, and I go back on day 5, and guess what? He's the one that's going to tell me, oh, she had a bit of engorgement, so I did this and I did that, and I did that. And then he'll bring me the chart and say, you know, she said this. I'm like, well, the chart is not necessary, but fantastic, you've done a great job. And then their friends will have children, and they'll say to their friends, oh, you know, this is what we did. Because when guys talk to each other, they tend to listen to each other. I don't know, my partner doesn't listen to me that much. But, you know, but I find that with the guys, when they talk to each other, they listen to each other. And the other thing that I thought was really interesting, something that I've taken away from doing my classes, like how I'm doing for time. Okay. The other thing that I took away from doing antenatal classes was I looked after, or I taught a very young Caribbean family, a Caribbean couple, very, very young. I think the guy must have been about, the lady was about 20 and the boyfriend was 22. And he'd been in trouble and been in and out of prison. And I had to do, I don't know how I managed, but I knew it was going to be difficult to get this guy out to come to the classes, because I just knew it was going to be difficult. Anyway, eventually this gentleman comes, and we explained, that day we were talking about looking after a baby. So we explained about his role and what he could do. And we talked about breastfeeding. This guy was fascinated. You know, so he would see me and he'd say, you know, because he lives in the neighborhood, he would see me and he'd say, oh, midwife. He knows my name, but he insists on calling me midwife. I said, hey, midwife. So, you know, I said this and I said that, and you said this and you said that. Which, you know, what do you think about this and this and that? And I say, and he was like, okay, well, see you next week. And then he'll go back, and then he'll come back the following week, and he had a whole list of questions. And you know, the funny thing is, the other guys, the professionals in the class, had similar questions, but they wouldn't ask. But this guy was so into it that he came out, and he was so enthusiastic. But by the end of the class, all the guys were talking. I mean, this guy broke down all barriers, you know. And these guys these were the guys who would be hanging out together. You know, yeah, we know, you know, socially and, you know, economically they were all different, but it didn't matter at that point, because he made it seem all, you know, we're all in the same boat together, you know. So, and it was such a beautiful thing to see. And so I'm just thinking, why aren't we doing this? You know, why do we have to wait for example, a midwife to set up a class? Why can't we do it amongst ourselves? You know, get a few people together and set up a class and get somebody to facilitate it, you know? How many of you here are doulas? So many of you. You know, how many, I mean, it takes about an hour or an hour and a half to start facilitating the class. And sometimes when I do antenatal class, I find that sometimes I talk too much, you know? And so sometimes I just remind myself to step back and let the other people talk. And you'll be amazed at the information that people have. You know, and the sort of questions that people will ask each other, they wouldn't necessarily ask because they think I'm going to judge them, or I'm going to think, why don't you know that? What do you mean? So I think perhaps we could, you know, within our local communities, like the children's centres, the community centres, if you go to them and say this is voluntary, you know, we're not taking any money for it. Can you give us 2 hours a month to do something, to do a class, and it's going to be free. Sorry. I think most people will be happy to do that, no? So maybe we could also perhaps do volunteer a couple of hours somewhere for free.
Yeah. And also as well, there's other spots that you can find instead of, if you don't feel confident enough to address it to approach children's centres, there's other facilities that you can figure out, like that is free, like the park. That's where I go. I do an hour and a half once a week where I invite parents to come and just mingle and talk, and they lead the discussion. If they need me, then I'll get involved. But otherwise, it's just bringing everyone together, and they've also got someone that can help to educate them and help to send them in the right direction or signpost them. So it can happen. And so it just helps you to be able to reach more corners and other people that wouldn't feel that there's a facility. And also, if it's laid back, sometimes you also attract the people that don't feel confident to reach out for support.
So in a nutshell, I just think it's about first of all education. People need to we need to do some education. How do you do it? We need to be out there, be visible, and show people that this is what we do. It's normal, and just help people, organize people to do it. And then also, I think a lot of it, honestly, this is what I'm thinking, that within our own families, start within the family, and then let's spread it out. I think family, community, and definitely the health service could help a little bit. But at the moment, the health service, we all know about the NHS and how much we're struggling. The NHS is struggling. So what can we do for ourselves? And that's just really to support each other. So I'm up for if somebody, because this is the first time I had no idea. I never heard about any breastfeeding week. I never heard anything about it until Ruth told me. I mean, if I'd been invited, if you invite me, I'm sure lots of people would be happy if you're given enough notice, that you would be happy to go and do, even if it's just 10-15 minutes, And I think you'd be amazed at how much the impact that you'd make. It's the most rewarding thing, no amount of money can give you that satisfaction. It's a different kind of satisfaction that you get from helping somebody, So I'm hoping that at the end of this, you all will be organizing events and inviting people. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Nana?
How do women find out about you? So women who, for example, need that additional support, how would they actually be able to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I have, at the moment, a lot of my work is by word of mouth. I'm also on the Lactation Consultants of Great Britain website. And I've also, and my website is I'm just building up my website at the moment, but I can leave some business cards. I've set up a company, and the company what we do is provide postnatal services. So it's teaching people about looking after newborns, so doula type thing, specific to postnatal things, and then breastfeeding. So my company is called babylink.co.uk, or just babylink. I'm on Instagram. You won't find much there, but I'm working on it. But I also got some business cards that I can give you. And I just thought, just to promote breastfeeding, I'm going to give everybody, give you a card. If you have somebody who you think would benefit from lactation consultancy, I'm happy to do it. But just, if they're saying, refer them and say this is from the Black Breastfeeding, I'm happy to do a session for free. Maybe a half an hour session for free, or even a phone call. I'll do phone consultations. I do it for free. I do a lot of phone consultations anyway. But it's just, I think, because one of the things that Ruth said to me was, amongst our community, that some people felt that they couldn't ask for help, or they didn't know where to go. And then this lady sorry, I forget your name. Zarina was saying that there's not that many Black breastfeeding support out there, And I was just thinking, there's so many of us. You don't have to be a lactation consultant. There's so many of us here in this room with a lot of breastfeeding experience. So why are we not putting, we need to promote each other, what we're doing, and then just spread the word that way. Because if somebody feels more comfortable about receiving support from somebody like themselves, then why are we're not visible enough, We need to be out there. So
and I just want to correct that. It's not just black, for
everyone, of course,
anyone
of course.
Who are from ethnic minorities.
Yeah, and also, it's not for everyone. We live in a very multicultural society, and so it has to be for everyone. But if you look at the statistics, it looks like it's quite clear that within the minorities, breastfeeding rates are very low, and I think a lot of it is because of the support, and also in my own personal experience is that I find that most within the black community we don't ask for help. We don't ask for help, and that needs to change. So so babylink, .co.uk, and that's where you find me. All right.
Thank you so much, Nana. Thank you. Okay, so the next up in line to talk with us, we have our lovely Benisha. Are you coming over? And take a seat. Okay.
Right, sorry, I've got my script.
That's okay.
Right, where shall I start? My name's Venetia. I've worked in childcare for 25 years and a bit extra. I just trained as a doula, and I also support women in Haringey for the Breastfeeding Network as a breastfeeding helper. I was asked to do just a quote and a picture for the celebration of Breastfeeding Week. And it caused a bit of controversy because the piece of paper I put was Black Women Do Breastfeed. Sent that off. I got an email asking if I had any facts to back it up. And I thought, are you having a bubble? I'm black, I breastfeed. What else is there to give you? So I kind of went back and forth a bit, and I've experienced a little bit of institutionalised racism about this article, which I'm going to read later. And it was quite shocking because the person who was emailing asking for all these facts and figures and do we really want to put this, we don't want people coming back and forth, and I said, well, I'm black and I breastfeed, what else do you need to know? I'm in the community, I talk with my community, I am a black woman who breastfeeds. And I actually said like a kind of quote, if I was Asian, if I was white, would you be asking me the same question? Didn't actually get an answer, I kind of got one of those non-answers. And then they posted my article up, and it had been a little bit, I think the phrase was whitewashed. So certain things had been just taken out and then reworded in a bit more acceptable manner. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to read my original post, if that's okay with you guys. So I'll start. It says, I'm proud to be a black woman breastfeeding a 2.5-year-old, and I will continue to do so for as long as my child needs. That being said, my breastfeeding story within the Black Afro-Caribbean community is not a common one. Recently, my picture with a quote that Black Women Do Breastfeed was posted on the BFN Facebook page for National Breastfeeding Celebration Week. My statement of Black Women Do Breastfeed is based on my cultural and personal knowledge, and I want to highlight the fact that the numbers of black women breastfeeding is below the general average in the UK. The percentage of these women still breastfeeding babies at 12 months, well, let's say it's a bit negligible. There are no specific documented statistics for women of colour as yet, and my experience and research over the years are the reason I write what I do, to show other black women it's normal, it's natural, and that black women do breastfeed, because all they see around them are white women breastfeeding in public, white women on TV, white women on posters at the doctors and health clinics, and white women online. Culturally, African women are more likely to breastfeed than women from the Caribbean. The support for breastfeeding is extremely low in the Caribbean, and this is because of the availability of the low cost of formula and all the advertisement around that, social awareness, so that when the women come over to the UK, this way of thinking is continued and handed down within the families. Most of these women are not actually aware of the health implications, and even those who struggle financially think formula is better for baby because of all the extra vitamins, added formula and all the propaganda. One of the other reasons for low numbers is the sexualisation of black women and the inability to separate the breastfeeding and the breast as a sexual tool. Young black people, women don't want saggy breasts or a baby dangling off their tits. They want their body back as soon as possible, so they generally go down the formula route. The black female body becomes something for sexual appraisal very early on in life. Some girls as young as 2 are encouraged to emulate the actions on TV and music videos, twerking, shaking their booty for praise. This historical behaviour and negative influences from an early period of life you can understand the complexities of why some black women do not breastfeed at all. This embodies the enormity of the task black women face when it comes to the choice of breastfeeding, especially in public. As supporters, we need to be aware of this historical and cultural aspects of why a woman may be feeling uncomfortable in asking for any breastfeeding advice or help. When supporting a woman of colour, we need to be aware that the information is out there, the literature that tells us how to identify signs and symptoms of mastitis and other breast-related issues are basically for Caucasian women. Women of colour are not likely to have a red mark on our nipples. Our nipples look different from those portrayed in the pictures in the books and on the web. And when looking up signs and symptoms of mastitis and breast-related issues, literature all state I should look for a red mark where it mentions something around your pink nipples. I've never had pink nipples. The website and Facebook pages that I get support and information from are created for black women, by black women, but they are based mainly in America. And that's because there are no related information in mainstream UK. There's also no mainstream organisations with this information that's readily available. We, as black people, have created our own forums as a safe place to post pictures of our breasts, to gain support and information and discuss issues. We as black people experience these, but as they are in America, some of the information and support offered, or even discussions, we just can't access or utilise fully. I'm hopeful this will change, and that me and other mothers like me will be able to see our reflection in the literature and resources around us as standard practice in the UK. I've only just started joining these and learning about them because of my training to be a doula and to become a birth keeper of colour. I'm grateful that I've never had any issues in my breastfeeding journey, and if I had experienced some of the problems or difficulties like the sore and cracked nipples that I hear about, milk blisters, etc., that some mothers have faced, I'm going to be honest and say I would not still be nursing my son at 2.5 years. And that's coming from someone who's worked in childcare for 25 years and knows the benefits and is an advocate for breastfeeding, but it's also because I actually don't have any family support. No one in my family breastfed past 6 months. These things can bring down, your beliefs and challenge, your intentions. Other black mothers don't have the experience or knowledge I have, so their breastfeeding experience without the support will end abruptly. And as we, as doulas, mothers, sisters, aunts, cousins, we're doing them all a disservice by not talking about it and not providing them with the relevant information and support when they ask for them. So here's something I want you all to think on. Next time a woman of colour comes to you for help, whether you be a family member, professional or a friend, how can we tell a woman of colour what signs and symptoms to look out for? Do you know what signs and symptoms to look for on yourself? And if you're unsure, who do you ask for advice? What factual resources can we refer her to that she can identify with? When I started my breastfeeding journey, I didn't know the answers to any of these questions, but the literature's out there, and so are the pictures. You just need to look. And that's my article.
So do you think that's more prevalent in the UK than like in our home, our countries of origin, or do you think
I
it's
can only
transferred?
speak from experience, and when I've gone back home, both times I had my son, and I don't care, I just breastfeed wherever. I was on the beach, I was the only person breastfeeding. I walked around, I saw a lot of kids, I saw a lot of babies, I saw bottles. But I also saw a lot of people in bikinis, I saw people topless, and it wasn't frowned at. I saw a few people looking at me, and I did say to one man, I said, don't worry baby, you can have yours next. And he abruptly turned back. But it's more common to see people half naked walking up and down the street than it is to see someone breastfeeding a child of any age when I've been back home. So that's my personal experience. I don't know what anybody else's are. I suppose it kind of varies from country to country, village to village, and it depends on your actual village, if that makes sense. Because if you go and you're staying with your family, if they're a breastfeeding family, it's normal. I don't really have that. So if when I went back home, they were like, oh, it's still on the tit, and I'm like, yeah. And it's a breast, not a tit. So there's I think there's disparities of everywhere. So yeah, okay.
Sorry, did you guys hear the boys go past?
Yeah.
Did you hear them all go scream? Do you know what they were screaming out?
Yeah,
The poster, the breastfeeding poster. You see?
Mm.
You see?
I saw them and they're like,
they're thinking, oh, breast, because they, even at a young age, are thinking, oh, that's private and it's sexual and it's not for feeding, even though all the breasts that are on the window, but they actually have their mothers feeding their babies, and we have kids.
It's not erotic pictures, it's breastfeeding.
Yeah, and it just shows how much it is not normalised and how much work we have to do.
Yeah, we just have to be more visual.
Definitely, we have to all be visual and maybe just put like. Who saw that picture of the lady that actually put the blanket over her head when someone... I had to repost that. That was so fun. Yeah, I think we should just all do that. Someone says cover up, just chop it over our head and just let them continue watching us feeding our babies. Alright, not really.
Or the nipple hat, the breast hat that you put on the babies.
A nipple hat. What's that?
It's like a knitted hat with a nipple on top.
Yeah.
Oh, where is it?
When you look at their breastfeeding, it just looks like a breast anyway.
That's funny.
My son has a knitted boob. Actually, he's got two knitted boobs.
Knitted boobs.
He's got dolls and he pretends to breastfeed him and he doesn't know what a bottle is, so I bought some brown knitted boobs. And he sits there with Dolly and breastfeeds his baby. And it's quite sweet. And some people are like, what's that for? I say, he doesn't know what bottles for. A lot of people think I'm a bit weird, but I'm like, bottles are everywhere. So if you think about it, from everywhere, it's just the bottle is the norm and the breast is not. So, just change it every little,
You need to counteract it.
Exactly. And also, I just want him to be able to identify with things, because some people say, boy, you shouldn't push a buggy, boy, you shouldn't do this. And I'm like, men push their children in a buggy, a boy can push a buggy. He's not going to turn gay just because he put a baby in a buggy and pushed it. It's reflecting life. So we have to try and reflect life in a positive image as much as we can.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Yeah.
Why do you feel that your original post, I never saw the original, but this is the original for me.
Yes.
So what do you think triggered some sort of change in what you had put? Because it sounded fine to me.
They didn't put the phrase about the sexualising. Actually, the post was a lot shorter, and certain words had been, you can read. It's more that it wasn't my words, and they said they would use it, and then what happened was when I didn't actually get told that it was going live. I had a couple of people message me saying, I just seen your post on, I'm like, oh, what? I don't have Twitter, I didn't see this. So when I looked and I was like, and even people who have met me for a few days or whatever, they're like, it doesn't sound like your words, it sounded a little too clinical. And I have a few school friends and stuff, and they, messaging me, and I'm like, wow, ping, 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 first thing in the morning, I'm like, where's this all coming from? And I had to go on Facebook and looked, and I was just looking and had my little face on there holding, let me do breastfeeding it. It just was completely just, they anything that would would have been seen as slightly controversial, a little bit kind of they just whitewashed it basically.
Sorry, I missed you. Where was it posted?
It was posted on Twitter. It was posted on the Breastfeeding Network Facebook page. Yes.
Right.
They did rectify it and put my actual words later on, but it took about a week. I think it was. Yeah.
And so we go going.
When they did change it, did they say why they originally changed your words, or did they just make
No, that wasn't. No, it was just like, oh, we just thought we just, and it was just lots of fluffing around, but no actual explanation. I just said, look, it's not acceptable. I said, and then I used the word institutionalised racism. It's not acceptable. I said the fact that you're asking a black person to pull it in words. I said I'm saying it as a black person, not as a black peer supporter. And I'm saying it as a woman who's breastfeeding, and I've had the difficulties of, I said I've been volunteering for a year and I've seen 2 black people come in asking for help. I said, so obviously, that in itself, and I thought, I'm talking to you and telling you this is the problem, this is what we've got. And it's almost like they weren't acknowledging it, like, oh no, we hear breastfeeding rates and da-da-da. I said, that's fine, but where I am, this is the situation. And this is what I see and this is what I'm experiencing. So acknowledge it, accept it, and don't dismiss it for the facts that you see in the Guardian or the Mail. So yes.
Yeah, and with you saying that, funny enough, I had just get into Facebook Live. So I also was contacted, like when I started to promote this event, I was contacted by the Metro. And they was like, oh, we'd love you to do an article for us. And I was like, oh my gosh, do I really have time for this? Because I'm organising this event. And it was last minute when they contacted me. So I was like, they was like, it would really help with promotion. And I was like, well, it would help with promotion. Then I would have to push it less. Because there'll be, who doesn't know about the Metro? And, sorry, if I'm hotting them up online. But then afterwards, so I sent them my piece. I was like, do you want my original piece? They said, no, we want it different. So I was like, okay, that's even more time. So then I was like, okay, I'll change it. And what questions do you want answered? Because I think it seemed like they wanted something particular. So I goes, okay. I sent them my piece in my words. The same thing happened. They was like, actually, they changed it up, took out some of this, moved it around and was like, and can you back this up and can you back that up? And I'm like, look, the event is called Why Black Breastfeeding Week. I'm not meant to explain the every whole why within this article. And if that is what you want, then you need to come down to the event. So then afterwards, just because I didn't manipulate what I was what I read the way they wanted it to be, they was like, oh, I don't think we can, after wasting my time, I don't think we can air this anymore. Actually, it's not because we haven't got this information, and we're not talking about the Caribbean, it's the UK and all of this stuff, but they don't realise how much our cultural background reflects people who we are today as well, and how, because of our parents have still got the culture in them, and then it goes from the grandparents, because we always look and learn from our parents. That's one important thing that we all do. And so it was. They was trying to dilute it. Don't get me wrong. She seemed like a very lovely lady. I didn't know her, but at the same time, it was manipulated. It could have been who was above her that says, no, we won't put this out. We won't put this out. You need to get them to change it. But then it just goes to show that this is obviously a pattern.
They want it on their agenda,
and that's just with an article. So there's a pattern also within the system, and there's a pattern in the NHS.
Would you say then, sorry.
It's okay, that's it.
Would you say then this is exactly why there needs to be spaces where we can publish, freely speak about something, because it seems that there seems to be some sort of pattern where you're being kind of filtered or sanctioned and changing. And I've seen recently an altercation online where someone tried to come towards a doula about a request that was made from a client, and what I noticed in that thread was that when she said something, she continued to be combated on it. But when someone who wasn't black said exactly the same thing, it was then
Acceptable.
And yeah, accepted
And that's the same thing.
So I'm thinking about how does that then kind of, how do you guys feel about that?
Well,
what your experiences really?
What you were saying is similar to what I've experienced on social media. I've only been on social media like this since I've become a doula, because I was told that you have to get onto Facebook, because if you want to be a doula, this is what we do. So I was like, okay, I have to be on Facebook. I never was on Facebook beforehand. And with that, I started to join some groups and some breastfeeding groups because I'm so much into what I'm doing. And there's a lot of aggression in there. Like, you go in these groups, when you find these groups, especially the groups in the UK, and I'm looking at the UK because we're in the UK and I'm working here. And a lot of the time you don't really find there's much black people in it, black mothers or actual practitioners. There's hardly any, so I don't mind that. That's fine, as long as we're all sharing the same information. We all love what we're doing. That's the main point, and we're all trying to help. But then it's a thing where you start to realise, actually, when I mentioned this, it's like, why am I getting tons of bricks thrown at me? For what reason? And then everyone else is like, they're getting roses when they speak. Yes. And it just goes to show the racism that is within it. And it's like, also as well, they undermine that if you've said something or suggested something, which they would have suggested, but if it's that you've said something that that basically gives you credit for what you're doing, or that is positive and that is right, sometimes they find another way to go around it and undermine you. Don't get me wrong, it's not everyone, but when you're the minority, you can feel like shut out. And if I'm coming in there as a practitioner, and imagine if I came in there as a mother asking for support, and then I'm not receiving the support.
And no one's answering your questions. And then when everyone's putting up their pictures, no one's liking your picture. And there's someone contacted me actually in regards to selfies of mothers, because they noticed that within the forums that there's always got selfies of white mother and babies. When they say, oh, put out a picture of us breastfeeding, like everyone show your baby, let's see how plumpy they're getting. And then you see all the white babies come up, and then you don't see the black babies. And there could be black mothers in there, but they just don't feel confident to put that picture up there. And so this is the reason why there are groups that has been created for women of colour, for babies of colour. I've even created one because as soon as I got on social media, there was a lot of drama. There was a video, I think some of you have heard about the video that they was putting out to promote breastfeeding, and within that video there was no women of colour at all, and it was all glossy. It was like a lot of like middle class, upper class white women breastfeeding their baby with a gloss background. Breastfeeding isn't always glossy, I'm telling you that now. And it just looked all glossy, it just looked quite fake anyway, and then on top of it, it just looked like breastfeeding was just for one colour. And this was in the UK at this day and age. Do you know what I mean? So then it was a thing when someone spoke up about it, they was basically shut out and was like, well, if you're not happy, get out. Basically, get out. Yeah. So she had to then recreate her own group as well. And it was a thing where it was like, yeah, let's create our own group, like, because we need a space where we're going to talk with this breastfeeding. And it may seem like a childish thing to do. Oh, you got kicked out of one group, so you thought you'd create your own. But no, it was actually helping to create a space. So women of colour, a safe space where women of colour can feel that they can speak and talk and can share this information with each other. So yeah.
I really liked what you said about the glossy photos. Allegedly, we have this problem constantly of photos that are sent to us, and they're so beautiful, they're just not real.
Yeah.
You know? And getting hold of photos, I don't know if you have this in ABM of people of colour, is virtually
hardly. It's so
when
difficult.
niece gave birth, I said, just sign this form and then just
take some pictures.
Okay, you're in LA, but it doesn't matter. Unfortunately, my niece is like one of those glamorous women on earth.
Oh.
So to tell her to dial it down, I said, you can't do this. This isn't real. It's real for you.
Yeah.
It's not real for the rest of us.
It's true. It's true. And even like, to be honest, even like within these groups of women of colour, and you ask them to send a picture of a selfie, it's a very small percentage of the amount of the women that are in that group that sends it, but you still get a few. And it depends on what you're asking for it for as well. If they know that it's like for educational purposes, you'll have the ones that are confident. And I try to say not them glossy pictures. Let me see you looking like a mother that's in her pajamas and breastfeeding with hair mad and everything. Like, because that's the realistic of it. Because when you're at home and you just had a baby, you ain't got no time to put on no lippy. When you do see, don't get me wrong, the beautiful pictures are beautiful, but it also makes you feel that I must look like that when I'm breastfeeding. If I'm not looking like that, then something's wrong, and maybe
yeah, it's just on social media. There's so many photographs. You've got to have the photo that's going to make the mother stop and look and read. You know, she's got to connect with it, and she's going to connect with it when it does look like her.
Yeah,
it's as simple as that.
It's right. That's right. And that's what we're trying to do, trying to create and try to do some more research.
I love this one here.
it's on the bench.
Beautiful.
It's lovely. I've got that.
So raw, it's gorgeous.
So all these pictures that I've got here, by the way, are pictures that women have sent to me and agreed for me to put up and to use for my purposes. Okay. So yeah, so we're gonna have Robin talk now. Thank you, Venetia. Thank you.
Sorry, bear with me. I'm not a great public speaker, so I had to write it, and I'm going to be reading it to you. But I'll introduce myself again. My name's Robin, and I'm a breastfeeding peer supporter from Lambeth, and I've trained with the Breastfeeding Network in 2013. And then I'm a newly mentored doula as well. Yeah. So I'll be speaking about my experiences as well. Okay. So I live and work in Lambeth, where there's a significant Black and ethnic minority presence, and I'll be speaking about what has stood out to me over the years in regards to breastfeeding within the Black community specifically. I'm really encouraged by the discussions that we've had today, and I hope we're all reflecting on this information. It's of such great importance that we acknowledge the difficulties that Black women face within breastfeeding, within birth in general, and wider areas of everyday life. Black women are often at the bottom of the socio-economic pyramid, and we don't acknowledge that enough. And we need to have these discussions to work on changing this narrative for future generations. There are many reasons why we need Black Breastfeeding Week, as we've discussed earlier today. Inequalities exist in plenty of areas of life for Black women, and breastfeeding is only part of a wider racial issue we also need to be addressing. We have a very long and complicated history of infant feeding, and I feel we should start by giving that some recognition and looking at how our history actually impacts our communities now. And we need more awareness of this and acknowledgement of how, you know, slavery and wet nursing and all of that actually does continue to impact our communities. So it's common knowledge, I'm sure you're all birth workers and people who work with young babies. You're aware that breastfeeding in the UK is quite low, and the last UK-wide study in 2010, you know, that initiation of breastfeeding nationally was at 81%, and then by 6 to 8 weeks it falls to 55% of babies receiving some breast milk, so that's formula mixed with breast milk. As the weeks go on, it continues to decrease, and as we get to 6 months, there's 34% of babies receiving some breast milk, and only 1% exclusively breastfeeding. The World Health Organization and the NHS recommend babies receive exclusively breast milk until 6 months, and breastfeeding is continued alongside solid foods at least up until 2 years of age, and beyond if the mother and baby duo wish. But in the UK, it's only 1% of women are able to meet part of this recommendation. And obviously, when we break this down further, we begin into demographics, we notice that Black families take up an even smaller percentage, especially towards the 6-month mark. We need to discuss the reasons why Black women are not taking up equal space within this, because it can be strongly argued. Of course, Ruth mentioned earlier that the higher infant mortality rate, with 50%, Black babies are 50% more likely to die within their first year of life, can be strongly linked to the low rates of breastfeeding within the Black community. So I'm going to be speaking about one factor as to why Black women are not able to meet these recommendations, and this is representation, or the lack of representation within our community. The face of the breastfeeding movement, as it's been said earlier today, it's really overwhelmingly white, and the language that we use is usually centering whiteness as well. And we need to work to highlight and change this so that we can connect with Black women and help them to breastfeed. So while preparing for this event, I did come across an article, maybe some of you will have read it,
The article featured the experiences of 3 Black women discussing why we have Black Breastfeeding Week. And one mother shared her experience. So she was trying to breastfeed, and when she went to her breastfeeding supporter to talk about fresh, the woman said, well, pink nipples are an indicator of fresh. And someone mentioned earlier as well that the language that we're actually specifically trained to use, I've been trained to identify fresh and talk to women about fresh, and we are told to look for pink shiny nipples, which obviously Black women cannot identify with at all. So yeah, the Black women the woman who wrote this article, she did say, she went on to say in it that she found this use of language really damaging. And I feel like when we have language that centres a group that you can't identify with, you're not connected to, it immediately excludes you and creates barriers with our communication. So I feel like with the right education and information, breastfeeding supporters and educators, we can work to make our language a bit more inclusive in general, and so we're not unintentionally harming Black women who are trying to access support. So yeah, these microaggressions can be avoided with a bit more work from us breastfeeding professionals. If we're not feeling connected and we're not feeling understood, if our existence is not acknowledged, our culture and our differences, it can become a erasure of Black motherhood. And we've been talking a lot today about visibility of Black women breastfeeding. We just don't have enough of it. And yeah, that's obviously why we have this week. So following on from that, the need for representation, I feel like the role of a breastfeeding peer supporter holds a key place for changing this. When I'm speaking about this, bear in mind I'm talking specifically about my experiences in Lambeth. It's quite a populated area, it's very diverse, there's a big Black community there. And with health professionals, it's common to see a Black health visitor, a Black midwife, but within the realm of breastfeeding specifically, it's unlikely that you're going to have a Black peer supporter, and especially a woman who has breastfed their own children as well. So just in case you don't know, a peer supporter is a woman who has breastfed her own child or children and has had specific training in order to help other women with breastfeeding. So I feel like if more Black women who have experience of breastfeeding took up these positions within their communities to support their peers within the Black community, we've seen increasing rates because of, again, getting that visibility and seeing it done with women who look like us. And we need to be reflected and able to connect and identify with the people whom we're taking information from. In order to trust them, in order to feel comfortable with them, we need an understanding of our culture and our backgrounds. And also a very sensitive history that I mentioned earlier, it still impacts us heavily, and it's not given the significance it should have. So now within my role, when I'm supporting a Black woman or a woman of colour, it's not that I don't connect with white women, it's a different kind of connection. There's a familiar ease to the conversation, there's a relatable experience, in the way that we relate as mothers, but also the way that we experience the world as human beings, there's that connection. And humans tend to feel more relaxed and we feel understood, and if we feel understood and reflected in some way, we tend to relax. And when someone is offering you practical support and information about breastfeeding, about your baby's health and evidence-based information, and most importantly, listening to your story, women are more likely to listen to those people who they can identify with, to trust what they're saying, engage with them and give them some time. So yeah, this is what I'd like to see, more Black women within the lactation support field. We desperately also need some more diversity within our publication, as we were just discussing that advert that went out, and our promotional material. A lot of the time it is white faces there, and that's not doing us any justice, because there obviously are so many Black women breastfeeding, and we're not visually seen, if you get what I mean. The other thing that I wanted to share with you, and then the white people who are dominating the lactation scene at the moment, I'm not going to be ignorant to say that they don't also want to see a rise in breastfeeding within the Black community. Of course they do. I feel like sometimes they don't have enough information or education, or maybe they haven't been exposed that much to the Black culture to connect with women in the same way. And it might be controversial to say, but we all have prejudices, we all have biases, and there is a lot of institutionalized racism within our language, as I was saying before. And our white peers could maybe benefit from being in spaces like this, or like specific training to kind of work around engaging with ethnic minorities and black people. The other thing I wanted to share with you is about the project I've been working on in Lambeth. So within Lambeth we have milk spots or breastfeeding support groups, and they're on every day in multiple locations throughout Lambeth, usually in the children's centre. And it's universal, so all mothers who give birth within Lambeth can access these groups. And I've been in them for like 5 years on and off, in volunteer capacity as well as paid. And what I've noticed is that within these groups it's very dominated by white women, specifically middle class, more affluent families who are able to access that support. It's not to say black women don't attend to access support, but their presence is nowhere equal to white women. So we know that black people in general, and black women especially, face multiple challenges day to day, and within childrearing specifically, we often do not have the time or the resources or even the headspace to give priority to accessing support for breastfeeding. And frequently when black women face some issues within feeding, they try to solve it on their own, or solely within their community where we have low rates of breastfeeding, so there's not that specific specialised information for them to overcome it. They're not likely to access the local support that they can be entitled to, and that's just within Lambeth, where we have quite good support in terms of breastfeeding. If you go further out to the Midlands or wherever, there's less breastfeeding support groups, that are even more unlikely to see black women accessing those spaces. With the project I've been working on, we've been able to create like a proactive service, so pregnant women are called by the hospital trust and told about their service they're eligible for, and then if they consent, they refer to us and we get in touch with them, so we give them a call and arrange to meet them wherever is easiest for them. Sometimes that's their home or their children's centre, and just make it a bit more convenient, so the support is coming to them. And I try to meet my mums in their pregnancy, so antenatally we have a one-on-one chat and we talk about breastfeeding obviously, and expectations and responsive feeding, and all of the information that they need to have, but I also try to just get to know them as people and learn about their support networks, what their auntie did, what their mum did, what their grandmother did with feeding, and try to suss out what's kind of going on within their background. I'm building a relationship with them from pregnancy. Usually mums will then drop me a text to let me know that they've given birth, and we'll have a home visit or a telephone call, or a mixture of many and both. And we engage with each other until baby's around 6 months of age. So well after feeding is established, it's kind of the whole transition into motherhood we're able to support with. And the fact that we've been able to build a relationship throughout the pregnancy, ongoing as the baby's aging, it's just, it's a very different type of support, and I'm sure the doulas in the room know who have those chats, because you have that contingency of care. And I can't put into words the difference it makes when you have that personal connection with someone. You're more likely to trust them, feel comfortable with them, and go to them when you have issues. And listen to them when they refer you on to other services, because obviously we can't support for everything, but we have connections with like mental health teams in the area, and all of the various other things, we can connect families up with them. So when I was 17 when I had my baby, and I knew about these breastfeeding support groups, but I wouldn't go to one. I was so determined to breastfeed exclusively, but even when I hit issues, I was crying from the pain and like toes curling at every feed, and I was like pushing her away because I didn't want to feed her. I refused to go to a milk spot because I was very anxious, and I suspected that it would be dominated by white women, and white women who were a lot older than me and had no relatable experience and were likely to judge me. It could have been an inaccurate assumption in my head, but then through my peer support I found that it's actually not. Luckily I had my mum and my sister around who were very experienced with feeding. My mum fed all of her kids past 3 years old, and my sister the same. And fortunately I was able to feed my daughter until she is about 5. So I had a very different experience from the majority of young black women will have within Lambeth, and I'm very grateful for that, obviously. So this proactive service that I've been talking about, I would love to see it replicated in other areas, or a similar approach, that ongoing care throughout pregnancy, and more people of colour within it, so that we're the communities that we're trying to support and engage with are reflected in the care systems. Yeah. Sorry. I'm okay for time.
Yeah.
Okay. So peer supporters have the potential to offer more representation. We often have more time to spend with families than the average healthcare provider throughout pregnancy and beyond. We're not medical, so we're on a relatable playing field. There's no power dynamic or authority that one might sometimes find with medical staffs. And we're equal, and our common ground may be that our racial and cultural identity, but also our experiences and desire to breastfeed. We have a long way to go in terms of representation, and a long way to go before we make breastfeeding, to make breastfeeding spaces as diverse as possible. But it's not impossible now to make changes in our language and our visual materials, and providing various routes to access support for these groups of women who are not able to access the main ones that are there now. And this week, this acknowledgement and awareness gives us some representation, and it expels the myth that Black women are not breastfeeding, because we clearly are. And I find it really encouraging to be here and be part of this community, drawing attention to that. So thank you, Ruth, for organising. It's been amazing.
Thank you for your talk.
So to conclude, one line I'd like to say about why Black Breastfeeding Week is that it makes us visible. There is an erasure of Black motherhood within mainstream breastfeeding circles, but we are here and we're breastfeeding, and we need to celebrate that. We've been able to overcome the multiple barriers that we face. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone would like to ask any questions to Ravin, or?
I just want to ask, in terms of addressing health inequalities, in the area that North Manchester, where I live,
yes,
we are a very deprived area, and it's not just for specific minority. There are also, I call it indigenous or white. They also have similar issue as that. I mean, I'm not disregarding anything. It's just that's how I see it.
Yeah.
Because for me is the questions of health inequality that across. Yes, there are layers of various layers and layers, and then I think it's, for me is, because I have been working in the area where we have breastfeeding support, where we are supporting mothers in the very deprived area, regardless of an ethnicity and whatever language barriers, whatever. Because that's the things that works there. Because I don't know. I'm from Manchester. I'm originally from Malaysia, so that's different. I have a different understanding of lots of things, but also there are not understanding of some other things which, obviously I couldn't say that I understand. I understand the slavery and stuff, but we are part of colonization in the earliest. So those are the words that I, yes, in the back of my mind, but I feel that in terms of health and equalities,
it's similar for all people, regardless of our background. Is that what you're trying to say? Yeah.
In a way, yes. But because of here, because I see it as, because I live here, I live in the UK for more than 25 years. Nearly 25 years. So my experience from that, and then my second generation is different. The way that I suppose you are from, I don't know how.
I'm like third generation. I'm second generation, but I guess what I'd say is, poverty and economical issues do affect all of us, white people, Asian people, Black people, but you know, when you break it down, black people are less, they have more barriers facing them because we're the bottom, you know, bottom of, in terms of race. We have a lot more, you know, oppression directed at us. So accessing anything like health, a white poor person or disabled person, if you have this disability, you're a woman and you're black, and you try to access that same health, that same service or whatever, it's gonna, you have more barriers facing you because of that identity. So it's not to say that other cultures don't have those difficulties, it's just, it's a very different experience, and we need to highlight that.
Yeah,
draw
and
attention
also
to that.
I think it's nice to highlight as well, yeah, others, like being flexing, you know, other layers of, lots of layers.
Yeah, layers of
racism, of, you know, as you say, institutionalized racism or structural
and systematic, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to end the Facebook Live now. So say bye. Thank you for watching. Whoever's logged in. See you. And actually, you can find us shortly on Black Breastfeeding Week Facebook. And we'll be doing a live just to say love on top.
Love on top.
Love on top. Okay, that's not how we love it on. Hold on. Row number 41 to 45. Would like to come and get your prize? Very lucky. Thank you. Your golden taker.
Can I just say a few words?
Yes, you can.
Great. Very nice to meet you today. Came to support my god sister. I'm a woman who actually didn't breastfeed either of my children. I just wanted to let you know that, firstly, it's very nice to see that this information is available today, because it wasn't. It's very nice for, I think, when you are looking at women who didn't, to acknowledge that there were things that wasn't available, didn't feel comfortable, sexualization, not acceptable in public. So do keep doing what you're doing. I think it's great for the new generation as they come along. But thank you for my gift.
Okay, so we've got to do this. Hello, hi at Black Breastfeeding Week. This is us. We're doing the first Black Breastfeeding Week in the UK, and we just want to say hello and say thank you for Kimberly, Kadada and Ayana for starting up Black Breastfeeding Week over the US, because it's so important. And what do we need to say? Love on top. We're all going to say 1, 2, 3. Love on top!